Hello, here we are again at World Hydrogen Week in Copenhagen on day 2, having a fantastic time, lots of exciting discussions going on. I'm here today with Leanne Todd, who's our Head of Energy Transition and Sustainability at S&P Global. Welcome, Leanne, again. I know you've been here the whole time. What's your view of the event so far?
Lyn, thank you for having me. This is an incredible event. I am really impressed bringing the industry together and the dialogue and the conversations that have been happening over these last couple of days, and really seeing that there is still a buzz and an energy behind a very challenging market right now around hydrogen and how do we move things forward. But again, the floor and the energy and the conversations that have been happening with so many different companies and ends of from the government side to the financing to the people on the technology and off-takers have been incredible.
Yeah, and I know yesterday morning you were up there on the platform, you gave the welcome address, we had a packed room, a couple of thousand people here. You know, what was your feeling about it all?
Oh, the welcome addresses, first of all, are always really fun to give because you're setting the tone for what the day is going to look like in the conference and for the rest of the week. But that tone, I think we had a lot of compliments back to it, tried to talk about some of the positive ends of what's happening in the industry. As you know, we've got incredible research that we track everything happening in those markets. So wanted to really bring that to life and set the tone on a lot of the dialogue that was happening with a number of the other panelists. But putting some numbers to that. And I think that's always a really key thing of, while there's it's a slower uptick of what people thought the hydrogen markets were going to be doing, there's still a lot of wins. So how do we take that and really bring it back to some of the policy ends that have to get driven? But the opening, again, is such a great place to set that tone. And I think it really showcased out through a lot of the other panel discussions we were seeing.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that really stood out to me, I think, was the fact that we had a really nice scene setting from the professor from Princeton University. So we're moving across the regions from, a little bit more of a down environment in hydrogen in the US, but many other places are still on the ball with hydrogen. Europe's really committed, Asia's really committed. So is that kind of what you were hearing as well?
And that's just it. It depends where you are in the world. And I think the professor did a very good job talking and really bringing the geopolitics in for the different markets and how different regions are talking about hydrogen and what is going to be happening. And I think that's really the difference of understanding current U.S. administration, what we're seeing with regulatory aspects in Europe versus what is going on through those Asia discussions. Thought they did a fantastic job. And you saw that coming through a lot of the other topics in the panelists, really taking that discussion into a little bit more of, okay, how are we seeing it? There was a speaker from Oman talking about the markets. You've got folks asking how Japan is bringing and thinking about this and what are some of the changes that we're seeing outside of what China is working on. And then a lot of discussion, again, geopolitically on how the US and some of those regulatory changes and policy changes are driving this. And then a lot of focus on the EU, which is not surprising. We're sitting here in beautiful Copenhagen and, a lot of the folks in the market trying to understand what those practices and new regulatory aspects are going to be to drive that. So I thought that was a really brilliant way to take that and how things are moving into, again, a lot of the panelist discussions and different topics.
Yeah, I agree. And we can tell that the panel discussions are really vibrant by the room because the room has been packed the whole time, which is sometimes unusual at a conference and expo. And so we're really seeing engagement. The thing that I'm seeing quite strikingly is this connectivity going on between the regions, which is great, and how we're learning. So, for example, this morning talking about Oman, one of the investors in Oman is right here, and it was somebody who was from our India event a couple of weeks ago. And so, we see the India platform where you've got quite a centralized driven push into hydrogen, same in China. And then we've got Europe where it's a little bit more regionalized. And those learnings are really coming to life on this platform for the audience.
I think people are so interested in the global story. And as you said, there's a regional aspect, and then they want to understand how these other markets are operating. And I love the reference into India. We got to hear a lot about how India is trying to set up as a major player on the hydrogen space. I think you've seen a lot around thoughts in the ministry in India. And then a lot of questions on how China is still playing into this and how it'll impact some of these other markets. A lot of questions on what's working well and how does Europe move some of those things forward. And that becomes those regional plays for that. So yes, that sums it up really, really well. But the buzz around that, and still so many willing in that dialogue here at this conference, I think that's the exceptional part, is that there's a lot of engagement from both sides of the producers, the technology, and then again from that offtake aspect.
And then what we really need to get the markets going, as we've again been hearing, is not just the supply and seeding the supply, but the demand and the off-takers. And then from that becomes trade and the markets. And that's where we come in as S&P Global, because we're providing that market data that really enables the infrastructure to go around.
Yeah, and I think that resilient infrastructure part is a huge. So you're going to see a lot of the conversations where I'd say, in years past, very much about what's going to go to FID and getting those projects on the hydrogen, whereas a little bit of the different dialogue looking at the carbon pricing, a lot of conversation around carbon pricing, some of those policy drivers that they thought were going to move and it work a little bit differently. So a lot on the policy and the impact on that end of it, the adjacent aspects to the market. And interesting, it's an interesting thing for me, but data centers still coming up, and they're talking about different energy drivers for that. So you're seeing a lot of pieces that, some people would maybe look at the hydrogen conference and not realize all the different technologies, and even talking carbon capture in here and pieces to it. So I'd say that's sort of one of the gifts of us with the depth of the research, to be able to cover a lot of that commodity space, the different parts that are happening on the technology through those market movers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very pleased to be enabling the conversations, keeping it going round, from the investments through the offtake, through the pricing infrastructure, the market mechanisms, and into real technology questions. So happy to be here.
That's great. And I think the term that you're hearing on that energy expansion, this is still part of that story, and a lot of folks that are very much wanting to still lean into that discussion. So we're very excited to be part of it and helping the market come together, and the participants here be able to have a incredible dialogue, looking at those strategies and looking at some of the success points of things moving forward. So we're happy to be here in Copenhagen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very pleased to have you here as well, Leanne, and seeing it all and enabling everybody to get on and make this happen. So goodbye from us in Copenhagen. See you next year.